Hello and welcome back to Growing in the Garden State. My name is Tony and I am one of the team members that's been given the opportunity to use the New Jersey Governor's historic mansion, Drumthwacket in Princeton, New Jersey, as a teaching ground to help ensure that the community of New Jersey and the surrounding areas all know how to grow food for themselves. Now you can't learn everything in one quick series, so we've got a bunch of different segments leading up to where we are now. And where we are now in Zone 6B or 7, we're right on the edge. The Sourland Mountain Range splits Growing Zone 6B and Growing Zone 7, where the climate, the higher the number you get, gets a little bit warmer. And so as you go north to Vermont, say, the zone number starts going down and colder as the seasons aren't quite as long as we have here in New Jersey. So a lot of this program is about repatterning and teaching people to understand how to grow their own food, how to use nature and the elements around us, and how to appreciate them in a way that we can get food from this. So anyway, without further ado, let's get over to Drumthwacket and see what we've got growing on.
Welcome back to the vegetable garden at Drumthwacket here in Princeton, New Jersey. We are in the month of July now, so we're kind of in that height of summer when everything is really starting to take off. A lot of our cooler crops have kind of finished their initial cycle. In the first row here where you can see the kale, if you recall from previous sessions, this used to be a mix of mustard greens and baby kale. All the mustard greens and some of the baby kale has been harvested and used by the chef here, but we allowed the kale plants to stay in so that they will reach kind of full-size maturity and can be used that way. Our beans, if you come over here, beans are starting to come in nicely. These are bush beans here. And so what we're going to do today is give them a little bit more space to grow up between these two rows of kale. So the arugula here, which you can see has been harvested this week for use in the kitchen. We're going to pull that out just to give the beans a little bit more space to kind of fill in and start fruiting. You'll also notice if you look closely at some of the leaves, these tiny little holes are almost definitely made by little flea beetles. And again, that's just a cosmetic issue. There's not a whole lot you can do for flea beetles at this point in the season. So we're gonna just pull this out gently so that we don't disturb the roots of anything around it, but we have a fair amount of space, so we can just pull that all out. And that way our beans will have some additional space to fill in. So we'll come back to finishing up the arugula removal. But for now, we're gonna move down to the beet row. So here, early in the season, we had peas. I believe it was our last session. When we talked about pests, the peas really succumbed to an aphid issue. And although our insecticidal soap treatment did prove quite effective on the eggplant and some of the other things that had some minor aphids, peas really suffered, and then the weather turned hot. So we removed the peas. But as you can see, the beets that we seeded alongside them have really started to come in. What we're going to do now, so you can see there's a pretty thick sowing. If you look here, you can see a pretty good sized beet starting to form here. But what we want to do is give that plant some extra room to really bulb out and give you a good sized beet. So gently, we're going to start thinning some of these beet plants. So you want to kind of just gently tug out your tiny little baby beets. You can use these little tiny beet roots as well as the foliage. So the beet greens are really delicious. They can be eaten raw, they can be sauteed, you can throw them in soups, and they're just a really delightful green. So allowing, I'd say one plant every 4 inches or so is going to allow those plants to really fill in nicely. So we'll be thinning the beets today. Again, don't just toss these in the compost, use them up in the kitchen. So we are here in one of the beds that originally had one of our kale and mustard greens mixes, which has all come out. That's been pulled out. So we have a nice strip here alongside of our peppers, which are then bordered by another variety of bush bean. And what we're going to do today is just another succession sowing of some more radishes, as well as some additional arugula. It's a little bit, we'll see how the arugula does. It may bolt a little bit quickly since we have some hotter temperatures, but we can probably still get a single harvest out of that arugula. So again, since we don't want to do too much disturbance in the row since it's planted, I'm not going to do any kind of turning over of the soil, but I'm just going to use my tool to create, again, our little trench to seed along. And again, keep in mind that our radish and arugula seeds are really quite tiny, so they don't really need a lot of soil coverage. So again, we have our arugula seeds. And I'm going to use our little sprinkling technique, right, of just coming down the row, kind of rolling my fingers together to dislodge the seeds. Finish that up. As long as your hands are dry, and you have seeds, you can toss those back in the envelope. You just want to make sure you don't get a lot of moisture or any soil in your seed packs. And then we're going to just do a very light covering. So from the soil on the edge, just kind of cover up those seeds a little bit so that they can germinate. And we'll water these in today. It's supposed to be another hot week starting tomorrow. So we want to make sure that these get a good start for germination.
So when you're planting seeds in the summertime, there's several things you got to think about. One is when the seedlings come up, you got to have to protect them from insects when they're really young, and the 90-degree heat that we often get is tough on seed germination. It's tough on drying the soil out. So I like to use what's called a floating row cover. These are available through most of your organic seed suppliers, such as Johnny's and High Mowing and probably a few others. They do come in 50-foot rolls, though, so if you can get a bunch of people to go in on them, that is all the better. And there are other things like shade cloths, and I suppose you could probably use a sheet for a couple of days. The real advantage of this is that you don't have to worry about taking it off right away because sunlight will go through. I think it's about 84% of the sunlight actually goes through. So we just planted radishes here, and I am going to cover this. These things are 86 inches wide, and I don't need that whole 86 inches because we just have some radishes on the side of the bed, so I've rolled up most of it. And I have a couple of pieces of wood in there, a couple of pieces of bamboo actually, just to weight that down. So I am going to use the single edge, single ply, to cover my radishes. And I'll have to get another piece, but this is fine. And again, getting a little piece of wood, bamboo, but it was not that heavy. You probably should put a few more on just to weight them down. That'll protect them again from drying out. So I actually find that when I use these row covers in the summertime, that I can go about 2 more days between waterings than I normally would. You know, seedlings stage, you just want to keep them watered as you know, as well as you can. But this really helps if you don't get the water one day, or you think you think you're getting a rain and you're holding off. This really helps protect them, and it can help protect from things like flea beetles getting in there too.
But like you can see here, not only, because at first we thought rabbits, but then you look at the ground damage, like all of these have been chopped off. But then you've got the same damage way up here. And that's too high for rabbits. So that's gotta be mice.
Oh my goodness.
And I think squirrels would have done more damage.
What about deer?
Would have just torn it up. They would have just pulled the whole, do you know what I'm saying? This is a nibbler.
Okay.
Like if a deer went after that, I think they would have just snatched the whole vine off. Yeah, and you've got some kind of bean beetle as well. I saw them. But I don't think the bean beetles they're not chopping the, you know what I'm saying?
No, I hear you.
Yeah. But, and then you've got the holes, you see? So every couple of feet, all along, all the way down the back.
Well, yeah, I mean, they can.
You got the holes. So what I would suggest, if you're, like with this bed is kind of hard, the idea of putting a cage on top is like really hard. Yeah. Especially when you got climbing beans. But one thing that we could do, like you were saying, putting down the cinnamon or cayenne. I actually grow cayennes just to make a pepper spray to put on my vegetables. Obviously not right before harvesting, or you're going to have like very funny tasting beans.
Pre-seasoned.
Yeah, pre-seasoned, exactly. But one thing is that anything that'll irritate their nose. The other thing is that like all the extra weed growth that we have here gives them cover. So because we've got hawks and owls and stuff, if we just make sure, just expose where they're running and make sure that they don't have anywhere to hide. Like they're hiding behind all this stuff.
Of course.
So if we snatch all of this out, it basically exposes them to, you know, the birds of prey.
Sure. So that if they're coming in from under the fence from the garden, if they have to kind of make that exposed. Okay. So yeah, we'll need to mix up some. And you can also use it as a spray. So you can sprinkle it and also spray the kind of cinnamon, cayenne.
I like spraying it directly on my vegetables. Yeah. Just because it just makes it unpalatable, and it just makes them think it's unpalatable. I don't know why. We've got damage on the bush beans. Well, I started to say not quite as much, but that's not true. Those are chopped off too.
But they also don't have the structural integrity of the bush beans. They can't climb up that like they can on the support.
Right up the trellis itself.
So yeah, these have they seem to have outgrown the damage and are producing.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good point.
So yeah, well, I know that I have a nice stash of dried cayenne peppers from last year. So I can grind those up, make a little solution. And come back and spray. I think tomorrow it may rain a bit, so I want to do it after any rain, so that
just wash it away and waste all your peppers. Like that'd be annoying.
Yeah, but I'll take a look at the weather and find a good morning to come out and spray. So even though we're just at the beginning of July, we are going to start thinking about planting for fall. That'll be a whole other discussion in and of itself. But we're going to start another tray of some fall crops so that we can put those in as transplants when the weather cools down a little bit. But this will give them a nice start, and then we'll be able to get a fall harvest. So we have here just a 10-20 tray, plastic tray that I'm reusing. Some potting soil. This is just a store-bought organic garden or potting soil. Again, look for this label, OMRI listed. So that's for organic use. If you want to be stringent on your organic seeding practices, this bag has been out in various weathers, so it's pretty moist right now. I'm hoping there's no burrowing spiders in here. So this is my kind of sloppy method of filling a tray. And again, it's a bit easier with slightly drier soil material. But you want to get all the cells filled. You can also, if you have just excuse me, a few plants that you want to grow, you can grow in other smaller containers. You don't have to use the trays. You can also go back to our first tutorial where we showed how to make soil blocks. That's another great way to start seeds. And then to kind of tamp this down, I'm just gonna kind of go like that. Kind of level out the trays, show where I need a little bit of soil. And so the things that I'm gonna seed in here today are some lettuces, some kale, and some bulbing fennel. I'm gonna have to wash my hands so that I don't get my seeds all gummed up, but I'm gonna put those seeds in this tray and just follow the planting depth, or we can just bypass the washing the hands part. So here we have a butterhead lettuce seed. Again, real tiny seeds. Lettuce, I tend to put in 2 to 3 seeds per cell, just to make sure that I get germination in all the cells. So I'm gonna just sprinkle these kind of on top, and then I'll go back and put just a little bit of soil coverage over the seeds. And then we'll do the same with the kale, which is also another tiny seed. Fennel seeds are a little bit bigger. You'll know fennel seeds if you use fennel seed in any cooking, same size seeds. So those will get buried a little bit deeper. So I'm gonna kind of split this tray evenly between those 3 crops. And we have our bulb fennel. So again, like I said, these seeds are quite a bit bigger in comparison. And this, again, Johnny's usually gives a germination rate. So this is a germination rate of 92%, which is pretty good. I'm still gonna do 2 per cell. We can always thin them out, right? But I don't wanna just waste the cells or the time. So I'm gonna put 2 in. With these seeds, I'm going to just press them in a little bit so that they'll be covered by a little bit more soil. Again, my soil is quite wet, so you can see even the seeds sticking to my finger. And I'll probably find a slightly drier mix to sprinkle over top of this tray. And then finally, we're gonna do some red Russian kale. At this stage of the season, we're still in, this week we're going to be back up in the 90s. So these again are our kale seeds. Look very similar to radish and cabbage. These I'm going to do 2 to 3 seeds per cell. Sprinkle them in. Again, you can always thin them. But what I was starting to say is when we're still up in the 90s, things like spinach, which you would love to have for a nice fall crop, those are not even going to germinate when it's this hot. So unless if you have some kind of controlled growing environment where you can keep it cooler, those you'll have to wait on. We'll talk about that a bit later on, and also some ways you can help to mitigate the heat through use of something like a shade cloth. So I'm going to finish up this tray, get it covered up, and then I'm going to actually move this tray into a place that's not in direct sunlight. Again, these are crops that are that do better in slightly cooler weather, so putting them in the shade, a slightly shaded condition will help in the germination and growth process. So here we are in our summer squash row. And one thing that some folks want to know is how do I tell which flowers from the squash plant can be harvested without losing any fruit. So those of you who want to use the squash blossoms either to stuff or put on pizza, all of that. And so what you want to keep in mind is that you want to harvest only the male flowers. Plants will have both male and female flowers. I'm going to show you how you tell the difference. You want to leave some males because those are needed for pollination, but you can harvest a good number of the male flowers without losing any of the productive capability of your squash plants. So we are going to zoom in and take a look at how to tell the difference between male and female squash flowers. So you can see some physical differences straight away. So here we have a fully opened flower that's on a long, skinny stem. Here we have a tiny little bud, right? And you can see this bulbous part. This is a very young fruit, or the ovaries of the flower. So this is a female flower. Female flowers are going to actually make the fruit. And this one on the long stem is a male flower. So this one you could cut off and use for culinary purposes. You can see another male that has closed up. So this is a spent blossom. But then a couple other small squashes that are coming from the female flowers. Here we have another male flower. So you can see the long stem. There's no bulbous fruit at the base. And so it's a bit late in the morning already for harvesting, but you want to harvest your squash blossoms first thing when they're fresh and fully open. So rule of thumb, leave a couple of males on the plant, but other than that, you can harvest away.
Hello again, I'm Tamia McQueen, and we are back on garlic, and we're here at my home, Wildflower Farm. We normally would be at Drumthwacket, but we didn't get there before the chef did, so we're filming this portion here on our farm. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is nearly mid-July, which is when most garlic will be harvested in this growing zone 6B. Between late June and early July. So we just wanted to show you what that looks like. So here you have garlic that is ready to be harvested. It actually has blown over quite a bit with the storms, and it probably is a little close to being overdue for being harvested. So because we've had a lot of rain, you really don't want to harvest garlic unless you've had sort of 2 to 3 dry days, because when you harvest garlic when it's wet, it doesn't store as well because it doesn't dry out as easily. And also you can tear the outer paper wrapping, which reduces the amount of protection that it has in storage, and that too causes it not to store so long. And when you have a lot of moisture, you can actually get mold on your garlic, believe it or not, and that's not good at all. So we're going to harvest a few to show you what it looks like, but we won't do too many because we did have a lot of rain, and we want to make sure that it keeps a long time. Now this is silver white, which is a soft neck type. Your main types are soft neck and hard neck. So your hard neck will have scapes like we talked about before. These are some of the hard necks that are being kept for the bugles, and we'll talk about that. And these are the soft necks, which are the ones that you tend to see really braided very prettily in your farmers markets and stores, mostly the farmers markets. And by the way, you'll notice there's quite a few weeds. So we tried something new with putting down straw as a weed barrier. But as you can see, for our farm here, it helped a lot, but it didn't do quite what we wanted it to do. And we got a lot of weed cover, which actually reduces your bulb growth because it takes up a lot of nutrition from your garlic. So yeah, as we go, lesson learned. We'll try something different next year, but let me show you how we pulled it out. The main thing is that what you don't want to do is you don't want to come along and just start yanking your garlic, wet or dry, because when you do that, you tear the paper of your garlic, which again reduces the time that it has to store. It doesn't store as long, so you don't want to just yank it. If you're going to pull it, let's say you don't have any tools and it's all hand, you want to bring whatever your mulch is away from it as best you can, and really just run your finger around the base of the bulb
Again, it's best not to just yank it. And you can either pull from the base, or if you must, you put your thumb on the bulb, wrap your hand around the stem, and pull very slowly. If you must pull it all, right? That's the way you do it. And you can see that that soil is a bit damp. So you really, if possible, want to wait for things to dry out. The best thing to do if you have to harvest wet. So we know that we actually have a big storm coming tomorrow. So if you have to harvest your garlic to get it out of the ground, rather than leaving it to get even wetter when it's time to harvest, you'll use, the best thing is something like this, a fork. You don't want to use a spade or a sharp shovel because you're more likely to split your garlic with that. So all you want to do, again, keep an eye on where it is your garlic might be. So I'm going to take my finger and just rub so I can see the edge of the garlic is there, and I'm going to be well away from it. And I'm going to take it and go straight down so I don't slice it. And then I'm just going to lift like that. And then you've got your garlic there. Not shaking too much. You don't want to tear your paper. And you just remove as much of that as you can, being very, very gentle. And then pop that out. Yeah. So this is the first layer of wrapper, and there's that first leaf. So you see they completely correlate. This first leaf is dead. This wrapper is done. So each one of those leaves, you don't want to let it completely die before you pull it. So these garlics are hardnecks. They have the long scape, and they're being allowed to die back and completely flower so that, oh, the hand is messy. So that we get these bulbs behind the flowers. So they'll become a flower like this, and this one, and they'll open up, and right behind them are these bulbs. So these bulbs, when you go to harvest, you want to let them dry out to some degree. You don't want them to fall, but you can go back and plant them with your fall garlic, and the following year they'll give you that marble-sized bulb that we talked about last session. And when you harvest your garlic next summer, you will have that marble-sized clove. It looks like a clove of garlic. It looks like a marble. And then the following year you plant that again and you get full heads. So this particular variety, I'll have to see which one this is. I have the tag. I have to look at the tag at the other end. But this particular variety does not put out as many bulbs, at least this particular garlic. The bulbs are very large, and you can see you probably only have no more than 20 in that particular, in this breed. So this is a better look there as it comes out. Whereas some varieties give you a lot more. So this is a different variety, and as you can see, it actually has a double set. It's a very large set, but you have a lot of bulbs in there, a lot more than the previous variety, and those will all become marble-sized garlics if you plant them in the fall. Next summer you'll get that marble. The year after, every one of those become a full head of garlic. So this is what it looks like when you let your garlic stay in the ground too long. It starts to split like this, so your clove starts to open up. This one was actually pulled and left on the ground, so you can see that you had some critters that actually found it afterwards. But when your garlic head starts to open up and split, this is not going to store very well. So you really want to make sure anything like this, you can try to dry it along with the rest of your stock, but it's best to grate it, and I'll show you how we grade our garlic. So we keep stock for seed stock next year, we keep stock for sale, and then we keep stock like this that goes straight into the kitchen. So this chaos was my mad rush yesterday to get garlic out of the field before the storm hit, our first storm. We're going to get another set tomorrow. And I was trying really hard to get my garlic out of the field so that it didn't get too wet. And so the best thing is to hang your garlic, which will show you. But if you can't hang it straight away, you can't braid it straight away, if you know that there's a rain coming and that the garlic is ready to harvest, the best thing you can do is get it out of the field, out of the garden, and get it under a covered area so that it's not getting wet. And so it's a little tricky if you have lots of different varieties. So that's why we have the different trays and buckets and, you know, all of these things. But to be honest, it's a little bit of a bonus because I get to come down here and sit under the covered area instead of being on the field. I sit and have a cup of coffee and braid garlic. So there are worse things in the world. So the way that we braid garlic, hard neck is a little trickier to braid than the soft. So we'll take some of the soft that's not quite so dry. This is a Transylvanian garlic, which is one of my favorites. But I'll also show you, let me take a different one. I'll tell you how we grade it. So any of your stock, we'll use this one. Any of your stock that you think, so for us, this would be a B. It's a good size. It's relatively tight, and you can trim the roots and pull the darker leaves off and let it cure and, you know, possibly even sell that. This one is a really good size, and the wrapper is quite tight. So whenever your wrapper is really tight, you want to, for your seed stock, you want your biggest and your best heads of garlic you save for seed stock for the following year. So anything that where the wrapper is kind of tight and it's going to cure, you know, long enough to sell, then you can do that. But always save your biggest and best to produce bigger and better and acclimatize to your climate the following year. Anything that's split open like this, you can see this stayed in the ground way too long. The leaves are all gone. It's completely split open. This, you're better off just peeling it and chucking it into a freezer bag and sticking it in the freezer to preserve it if you're not going to use it straight away. This is not going to keep very long at all. And because it's small, not only will it not keep, but small cloves produce small heads of garlic. So this is what we would call C, or more to the point, K for kitchen. So that is how we divide it, A, B, and C. Seed stock, sale stock, or long storage possibly, and kitchen. I'm going to show you how to quickly braid your garlic without stressing yourself out because it looks scarier than it is. You take 6 plants. These are some of our B plants that may or may not store. So we group them together by grade, pop them between your knees, and you take 1, 2 there, 1, 2. Try not to let them fall. And you're just going to braid them like you would hair. Now, if you've never braided hair, it might take a little bit of a learning curve, but it's really quite simple. And you just braid it all the way down. I like to use, you can also use zip ties if you don't want to braid it. To be honest, you can just use a piece of twine or a zip tie to group it together. I like braiding them, A, because I just find it really beautiful. And also because I find it easier to hang them. I don't need as much twine or zip ties or anything like that. I can really just kind of fold them over or split up the bulbs and put them over the line and they'll stay put. So, but if you're like, I don't know how to, if you're sort of like, I don't know how to braid, why, that's not something I even want to learn to do. Just use some zip ties and literally zip, zip, and it's done. And you just all the way down to the end so that it doesn't come loose on you. And what's fantastic is that when you braid garlic like this, they make fantastic gifts. If you're going to give it as a gift, and there you go. If you're going to give it as a gift, you would want to get these a little more even and start lower down. And of course, you'd want to trim your roots. You don't want to trim roots and tops until they dry out if you're curing. If you're going to just braid it fresh and give it as a gift, you trim your roots, you pull off the dirty parts of the paper, and then you braid it up the same way. One of the things about growing garlic versus buying it in the store is that you can actually see that you know, oh, it looks dirty, it looks, well, you know, it's coming out of the ground. And as the papers come off, it doesn't store as long, but you start to get down to the white paper, which is what you see in the grocery store. They've pulled all the outer wrappings off, which is what you'll do once your garlic has cured for, you know, probably about 3 weeks in a warm, dry area. Sorry. What we do is we use a simple piece of rope across the rafters, and you literally just take your braided garlic. I split it in 3, and you pop it right on top of the line, and because it's braided, it'll stay. And we take our A all the way down to our C grades, and that way when we go to get them ready for planting, we know to go straight to the A side and work our way to the left.
So 3 deer seem to have gotten into the garden, and so our friends at Drumthwacket have put in a deer fence, which looks great, but it also gives us an opportunity to plant more in the empty row where the deer seem to have eaten all the beets. Okay, so we'll come up with a plan and try and start some seedlings and get them into the ground as soon as we can. We've actually started some late season squash, pumpkins. These are Japanese pumpkins, kabocha, and we can use these to put into that empty row.
Okay, well, that wraps up our episode for this month. I hope you're absorbing wonderful information and you're really getting excited about what we've got growing in our gardens. Now, our next episode, as we get later into the summer season, we're approaching fall and autumn. And as we now see, we need to think about how long the duration of those seeds take to grow, to fruition, right? So we've got to be ahead of the curve, knowing that when autumn comes, everything slows down, right? So by this next episode, we're going to talk about how to get ready for fall. And there are some fall plantings, things that are very important to get into the ground. So we're going to go over that in the next episode. So I do hope you'll join us again. And thanks for watching. And if you would like any more information or you need to connect, reach out. Go check out NOFA-NJ.org and connect and ask questions. And we're happy to answer what we can. So, all right, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.